The Detroit Lions are entering one of the most pivotal off-seasons in franchise history, and for the first time in several years, there is a sense that the momentum built under Brad Holmes and head coach Dan Campbell is being tested in a serious way. The franchise that recently transformed itself from a perennial rebuilding team into a legitimate contender now finds itself staring at a complex puzzle. Salary cap limitations, roster departures, and uncertainty at multiple positions have created a scenario where every decision over the next few months could determine whether the Lions remain in the championship conversation or take a step backward. Just weeks ago, the outlook seemed far more stable. But the offseason has delivered a rapid series of developments that have shaken the foundation of Detroit's roster. The trade sending running back David Montgomery to the Houston Texans removed a physical presence from the backfield that had been a major component of Detroit's offensive identity. Shortly after that move, veteran offensive tackle Taylor Decker reportedly requested his release, potentially opening a massive hole on the offensive line. Add to that the lingering legal concerns involving young cornerback Terrion Arnold, and suddenly the Lions are dealing with a level of uncertainty that this regime has largely avoided since taking control of the franchise. For Holmes, the challenge isn't simply about replacing individual players. It's about maintaining the structural integrity of a roster that was carefully constructed over several seasons. The Lions' recent success has been built on balance, depth, and continuity. Losing key contributors simultaneously threatens all three of those pillars. And unlike previous off-seasons where Detroit had significant cap space and flexibility, this time the front office must navigate those challenges with far fewer financial resources available. The salary cap situation means Detroit cannot simply solve its problems by chasing the biggest names on the market. Instead, Holmes will need to rely on the same philosophy that helped turn the franchise around in the first place, identifying undervalued players who fit the system and culture. Over the years, he has developed a reputation as one of the league's strongest evaluators of college talent. But the coming months will test whether he can also dominate the pro personnel market under pressure. The Lions currently face potential holes across the roster. Offensive line depth is suddenly a major concern, particularly if Decker's situation leads to his departure. The defensive front needs reinforcement at edge rusher. The linebacker unit could undergo a significant transformation. The secondary may require multiple additions depending on how things unfold. And on offense, Detroit now needs to replace Montgomery's role as the primary complement in the running game. When you look at the scope of the work required, it becomes clear that this is not a typical off-season retooling. This is closer to a controlled reconstruction while the team is still trying to compete for a Super Bowl. That balancing act is incredibly difficult in the NFL. Teams often either rebuild or contend, but doing both simultaneously requires precision and creativity. Holmes has shown flashes of that creativity before. Over the past few seasons, the Lions have quietly found value in several free agent signings who were not considered blockbuster additions at the time. Players like Rock Ya-Sin, Roy Lopez, Grant Stewart, and Avonte Maddox all arrived with relatively modest expectations, but ended up providing meaningful snaps and depth. Even earlier signings such as veteran guard Kevin Zeitler and defensive back Amick Robertson proved that Detroit's front office could uncover contributors without breaking the bank. Those types of acquisitions may not dominate headlines, but they are often the moves that keep a contender afloat when injuries or departures strike. However, not every swing has connected. Holmes has also taken bigger financial risks that didn't deliver the expected impact. Defensive tackle DJ Reader struggled to justify his contract relative to expectations, while the deal for cornerback Cam Sutton failed to produce long-term stability in the secondary. Even the early returns on the signing of DJ Reed have been inconsistent. Those mixed results are part of the reason this offseason carries such weight. Finding 2 or 3 productive free agents per year is manageable for most competent general managers. But Detroit's current situation may require Holmes to hit on 5 or 6 acquisitions in a single offseason. That level of success rate is extremely rare in the NFL, even for the league's best executives. And it's not just about free agency. The NFL draft will once again play a major role in Detroit's roster construction. The challenge is that the Lions only hold 2 selections inside the top 100 picks, which limits the number of immediate impact rookies they can realistically expect to add. Holmes has historically preferred entering the draft with flexibility rather than desperation, allowing him to select the best player available instead of chasing specific positional needs. This year, that strategy may be difficult to maintain. If the Lions enter draft weekend still needing a starting offensive tackle or a premier edge rusher, the temptation to reach for need could become overwhelming. That's the kind of situation that often leads teams into long-term mistakes. One of the most fascinating storylines revolves around the linebacker position, where Detroit could soon experience a major transition. For the past 5 seasons, veteran linebacker Alex Anzalone has served as the emotional leader of the defense. His communication skills, versatility, and leadership helped stabilize the unit during its developmental years. But the emergence of young star Jack Campbell has changed the dynamic of the position group. Campbell's rise to an all-pro level has positioned him as the future centerpiece of the defense, and that development makes it more difficult for the Lions to justify paying a significant contract to a veteran linebacker entering his 30s. Anzalone's contract situation has been tense for more than a year. He openly expressed frustration about his salary relative to his production, and despite negotiations, the two sides never reached an extension. With Detroit tight against the cap, it appears increasingly likely that the veteran captain will continue his career elsewhere. Several teams are already rumored to be interested. The New York Jets could pursue Anzalone due to his familiarity with defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn, who previously coached him in Detroit and New Orleans. Another potential landing spot is the Chicago Bears, where defensive coordinator Dennis Allen also worked with Anzalone earlier in his career. If Detroit ultimately allows him to leave, the Lions will need to determine how they want to reshape the linebacker group around Campbell. Internal options exist, including players like Derek Barnes, but the unit could benefit from another experienced presence who can handle coverage responsibilities and maintain communication across the defense. The free agent market actually presents several intriguing possibilities. Younger options such as Devin Lloyd, Devin Bush, and Nakobe Dean would bring athleticism and long-term upside. However, their projected contracts may fall outside Detroit's current financial comfort zone. More affordable alternatives could include veterans like Quincy Williams, Alex Singleton, or Justin Strnad. Each brings a different skill set, but the key will be identifying someone who complements Campbell without disrupting the defensive chemistry that has developed over the past 2 seasons. This is where Holmes' evaluation skills become critical. It's not simply about identifying talent. It's about finding players whose abilities translate specifically into Detroit's defensive structure and culture. Right in the middle of all this uncertainty, there's one thing Lions fans should keep in mind. The foundation of this roster is still extremely strong. The core of the offense remains intact. The coaching staff has proven its ability to develop players, and the locker room culture is widely considered one of the best in the league. If you're enjoying this deep breakdown of the Detroit Lions offseason and want more detailed NFL analysis like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next film room-style discussion about the league's biggest storylines. Even with that strong foundation, the margin for error is shrinking. Detroit's Super Bowl window is open right now, but windows in the NFL rarely stay open for long. Key players eventually become expensive, depth erodes, and the competitive landscape shifts quickly. The Lions must navigate this moment carefully. Overreacting in free agency could compromise the team's financial future. Moving too cautiously could leave glaring weaknesses on the roster. The best general managers find the perfect balance between aggression and patience. That's why this offseason may ultimately define Holmes' legacy in Detroit. If he manages to rebuild depth, replace departing veterans, and keep the roster competitive despite financial limitations, his reputation will elevate from excellent talent evaluator to one of the league's elite executives. But if the Lions fail to fill these gaps effectively and the team regresses in the standings, critics will point to this offseason as the moment when the franchise lost its momentum. The truth is that the answer probably lies somewhere in between. No general manager hits on every move. What separates the great ones is their ability to adapt when circumstances become difficult. For Holmes and the Lions, adaptation is the entire story of the next 2 months. Free agency decisions, draft strategy, contract restructures, and player development will all combine to determine whether Detroit continues its rise or enters a period of recalibration. And when the 2026 season finally kicks off, fans will look back at this exact offseason as the turning point that either strengthened the Lions' championship ambitions or quietly began a new phase of the franchise's evolution. If you want to stay ahead of every Detroit Lions roster move, free agency signing, and draft strategy discussion, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join the conversation in the comments about whether Brad Holmes can pull off the most difficult offseason of his tenure.